Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Northern Light Health Good Health is Good Business Zoom conference. In recent weeks in Maine, we've seen a decrease in cases of COVID-19 due to vaccinations. Over 62% of our total population is fully vaccinated, this leading to a decrease in hospitalizations and deaths. All good news. However, the Delta variant, which caused the overwhelming disease burden in India during April and May, then a significant surge of new cases in the UK during June, has now become the dominant variant in the US. In fact, currently, 46 states and DC have all seen increased cases over the last week, and there has been a 94% increase of new cases across the entire US. Those getting hospitalized and dying are almost all unvaccinated people. While we will continue to pay close attention to this more virulent Delta variant, we also need to apply what we've learned over the last 16 months to our businesses as the economy more fully opens. So today, we seem to find ourselves returning to normal, or is it to a new normal? Or what may have profound meaning for our time in history, taken from the playbook of Scott Kirby, CEO of United Airlines, who calls now returning to new. Let's apply those lessons learned and create our new. With this in mind, our focus today is on preparing your workforce to be present, engaged, and safe. The topics will include latest on COVID-19, work-life integration, how to move forward and not backward, how to define the business need, remote versus in-person, customization and flexibility. I'm Dr. Ed Gilkey, Senior Physician Executive at Northern Light Beacon Health. I'll be your moderator for the next hour. Our panelists today are Deb Newman, President and CEO for the Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce, Tony Payne, Co-founder and CEO of HighBite, Michelle Crocker, Vice President of Key at Work, KeyBank, Joe Siddiqui, Vice President of Human Resources and Employment Experience at Northern Light A.R. Gould, Angela Felicia, Director of Healthy Life Resource Program at Northern Light Acadia, Dr. Jim Jarvis, Director of Clinical Education at Northern Light Eastern Maine Medical Center and Physician Leader for Vaccinations and COVID-19 Incident Command at Northern Light Health. Before we get started, I will read our legal disclosure. The coronavirus pandemic is an ongoing, continuously evolving situation. Northern Light Health encourages everyone to follow federal and state governmental guidance and mandates. Northern Light Health does not know the particulars of your situation, so the information presented today is general in nature and is based upon Northern Light Health's own experience, which may or may not apply in your specific situation and which may be revised as we learn more about the coronavirus. Accordingly, following any guidance Northern Light Health presents today in no way guarantees that you, your employees, and/or your customers and clients will not contract or spread the coronavirus. A reminder, this hour is for you. If at any time you have a question for our panelists, please use the chat function. I'll keep track of your questions and have our speakers respond. Also, I hope each of you will take a few minutes immediately following this hour to answer our quick 5-question survey. Your input directly affects our topics and helps guide our future conferences. Dr. Jarvis will start us off today with a COVID-19 update. Jim?
Well, thank you, Ed. If I can have my first slide. So that was really a perfect introduction to what I'm going to talk about, which is really the variant issue that we're dealing with right now. And the major one right now is that Delta variant. It is now the predominant strain in the United States. To show you how rapidly this has been spreading, on the 12th of June, it represented approximately 10% of all new cases in the United States. As of the 7th of July, it represented 51% of all new cases. So it is clear that this is spreading far faster than we have seen any of the other strains, particularly the original strain and the alpha strain here in the US. It is considered to be 225% more infectious than the original strain. And I know we have a lot of business people up on here, so I'm going to say, yes, that number is correct. 225% more infectious. That's astounding. The time for it to be detectable is actually much shorter than we saw with both the original strain and the alpha strain, meaning that between the time that you become infected and the time that a test would become positive is down to 4 days rather than 6. And that's considered to be because this replicates itself so much more faster than the other strains, that the viral load becomes high enough for it to be detected sooner, which means there's less time for us to do that contact tracing and kind of slow the spread because of that. As Ed said, more than 99% of deaths are in unvaccinated individuals. So that's great news for those of us who have been vaccinated, because it does offer protection against severe disease and death from this particular strain. But for those who remain unvaccinated, that's a startling figure. There's also some things different about this one in terms of symptoms. Headache, fever, and runny nose seem to be the more predominant telltale signs that somebody may be infected. And if you look at that runny nose, this is prime allergy season. So lots of people have runny noses. And so it will become confusing for us when we continue to do screening. Cough is not as prominent. So we used to think about this is because it was a respiratory virus, that people would start having that cough, and that might be the telltale sign that they had infection, and it may not be the case with the Delta variant. And also loss of taste and smell is not as likely. And while that's great news for individuals, it makes it much harder for those of us in the public health world, because that sometimes was the first indication that somebody was infected with COVID, is that they'd complain of a change in their taste or smell. And we're not seeing that with this particular variant. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for us? It means that we need to continue to encourage and support our staff in receiving the vaccine, and anything that you can do to assist in that is welcomed, even if it's just so simply as saying, listen, we'll give you the time away from work so that you can go and get that vaccine. But if you want to, try to invite for an agency such as Northern Light Health to come and do a pop-up vaccine clinic if you have a large number of your staff that still are not vaccinated and really aren't getting vaccinated because of the lack of convenience. Though convenience shouldn't be an option, a rationale for not being vaccinated now, as we have plenty of vaccine across the state of Maine. Many of our primary care offices, including all of those at Northern Light Health, are now distributed the vaccine or have some place on site where the vaccine can be given. And many of our emergency departments, our walk-in cares, our retail pharmacies all have the ability to do vaccination now. So vaccines are out there. We just need people to get them. We need to be prepared for outbreaks, and particularly around staff exposure. And so that's going to be a concern for all of us. If a staff member comes in one day and then 2 days later tests positive, we all have to do that contact tracing and making sure that we're keeping that under control. So don't let your guard down. Continue to screen your employees for symptoms. Continue to make sure that those that are coming in and out of your facilities, your customers, your clients, your business partners, and the like, that they are not coming to work when they are ill. And of course, please, please, please continue that good hand hygiene. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So our next up will be a poll of all of our participants today. And we're interested in understanding what's top of mind for you. So if you would go ahead and weigh in on our polling, we'll take a look at what's on your mind. Five seconds. Great, well, thanks. Well, let's see, what do we have here? Unvaccinated people, about 35%. So, well, that's really important. The next up is the Delta variant. So, Jim, I think that's resonating with our group here today. And then we're getting our life back. Yeah, I think that's the hopefulness of all of us for sure. But I think the Delta variant and unvaccinated people certainly modifies that. And of course, rounding it out with 9%, where can I find employees? I think that's a significant national challenge as well as here in Maine. Okay, so I think that gives our panelists insight into what's on your mind. So now, Now for this segment, we will hold a roundtable conversation with our panelists, and I will incorporate the questions you place in the chat. So feel free to do that. And I'm going to start off and just see here. Okay, so we have, actually, I'm going to start off with this question. It actually ties into Dr. Jarvis, what you were talking about somewhat. A close friend works at Mass General and they are required to get a booster for the vaccination next month. Is there going to be a booster in Maine available? Jim, could you weigh in on that?
Sure. So right now, the CDC and the World Health Organization do not recommend boosters for anyone in particular. We do know that there is going to be a meeting of the Advisory Council on Immunization Practices next week, and on their agenda to discuss possible booster vaccination needs for people who are immunocompromised. I am not aware that Mass General has changed any of their policy. They are going to require initial vaccination, though, very shortly. So that may be where that came from. I don't know any specifics about Mass General, but currently the recommendation is that we do not need booster shots, and that just shows us the potency of the vaccines that we all got originally. I'm one that believe that at some point we will need to get boosters, but not currently.
Great, thanks, Jim. So now we're going to have our panelists introduce themselves and share with our audience. So panelists, in your professional life over the last 16 months, what pearl of knowledge or wisdom did you pick up? So start with an introduction a little bit more than I've provided and get into that sharing, if you will. Let's start with Deb Newman.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. I am Deb Newman, President and CEO of the Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce. A little bit about the Chamber. We have 5 staff who accomplish great things on behalf of our members. We have approximately 700 member businesses in 21 communities in the Bangor region. And that represents about 20,000 plus employees. The past 16 months, as you know, I don't need to tell you this, it's just been a lot of uncertainty and just not knowing what would happen next. And as a leader, I think one of the biggest challenges for myself personally was being okay with the 3 words, I don't know. I don't know when we'll return to the office. I don't even know if I can keep everybody on the payroll. I don't know when we will have another in-person event. I don't know how long we'll be masking. And as a leader, you want to have the answers and you want to know how to guide your team. So that was something that was challenging. And I think in addition to that, that it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to be transparent with your team when you're just not okay, and to allow them to know it's okay to not be okay.
Thanks, Deb. Yeah, certainly they argue that it's the 3 most used words in the English language, I don't know, but it seemed very applicable over the last 16 months for sure. Next is Tony Payne.
Yeah, thank you, Ed and Deb. I don't know really resonates with me over the last 12 months, so I can definitely relate there. Well, hello, everybody. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HiBite. HiBite was founded in August of 2018. We're a software company. We develop applications for the manufacturing space. And interestingly for us, we released our initial product last year, right at the beginning of February, just before the pandemic really hit this part of the US. And so we thought we were actually going to launch the product and hit the trade show circuit to kind of demonstrate the product. And as you can guess, COVID changed all of that. And I'm going to weave that into today's, sort of talking points. So pearls of wisdom that I got from the last, 18 months is there is no single playbook during a health crisis. I think every company needs to try as many things as possible. If it doesn't work, try something else. Be agile. And that's within the company, as well as with your customers. Try to make things just feel as normal as they can be, and recognize that no one really controls the timeline for getting back to normal or what we're calling a new normal. Thank you, Ed.
Great, thanks, Tony. Michelle.
Hi, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me here. My name is Michelle Crocker. I manage KeyBank's Financial Wellness Program, which is a program that really provides financial wellness tools and resources out into the community that we live and work in. So I have the pleasure of being responsible for Maine and Vermont. And really, when I think of a pearl of wisdom, I think it, is along the same line of what Tony just said, really just being able to be adaptable and creative when it comes to our business. So, we really needed to listen to our employees. We needed to listen to our clients. We needed to listen to the guidance that was being given and just really get creative with the solutions that we were bringing to the table. So we'll talk more about that, but I would say that would be my pearl of wisdom from the last 16 months.
That's awesome, Michelle. Tony and Michelle, we're definitely going to do a little bit deeper dive into some of those ideas that you've seen that work. So, Joe, you're next up.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Siddiqui, and I'm the Vice President of Human Resources at Arigold Hospital here in Presque Isle. I also work with employment experience for the entire Northern Light Health System, and it really is an honor to be with you today. And continuing along the theme you've already heard, when I think back of the last many months, the expression that comes to my mind is really the expression that necessity is the mother of invention. And we really saw that time and time again over this period. What we once thought was impossible really became possible. And I think of one of my colleagues, he very frequently uses the expression, let's find a way to get to yes. And there were so many times over this pandemic that we found pathways to get to yes. And we were able to do it incredibly quickly. In the past, we might have hit roadblocks, we might have had other delays, but time was of the essence. And so we had to get to yes and do it very quickly. And so it was really amazing to see that happen. And not only in our organization, but in some of the partner organizations that we work with. You may be familiar, we had one organization who repurposed their entire operation to be able to produce PPE for us when that wasn't what they did before, but that's what they did in the time of need. And they just like on a dime were able to switch and do that. And so it really struck me how the most successful organizations during this time have been those organizations that are resilient and very nimble in their operations. Been quite amazing and impressive to see.
So Joe, I don't know. I see a takeaway from that as a lesson learned. What you're saying is, being able to look back on whatever degree of bureaucracy slowed down the pace of change, particularly positive change, where things could take 1 and 2 years, we've been able to accomplish in probably days, if not hours at times, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
maybe look at that bureaucracy and say, is it useful to our businesses or not?
Yeah, we just didn't have the luxury to let things take that long. And so we had to find ways to do them quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great lesson learned. Angela.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I'm Angela Felicia with Acadia's Healthy Life Resources. And one of the things that I think really resonated for me, actually, in hearing the panelists, I agree with everyone, was what Deb had just started out with, saying, it's okay to not be okay. As a clinical social worker, I think one of the things that's been so, I think, inspiring, actually, that I've seen in multiple workplaces is people's sort of willingness to talk about how they're doing. And usually we don't get that in the workplace. And I think that's just been really great and affirming, and brings sort of a whole new level of sort of humanity into the workplace, which I think has been really, really great and rewarding for a lot of folks.
So another lesson learned to be leveraged, I think, there, Angela. Thanks. Dr. Jarvis.
Good morning. I am not just a family physician. I play one on TV. I have had the privilege to be able to lead Northern Lights COVID response for the last now 18 months. And so for me, lessons learned were really about courage. So people have touched on some things here. So the courage to say, I don't know. And often I'm saying that in front of a large gathering or on television when we just don't know the science. And again, things change on a regular basis with this particular virus and the pandemic. And so being able to say that, I think, is important. Courage to welcome change within your organization. We have done that often. Just thinking about from the education standpoint, what we're doing right now would not have existed 2 years ago. And yet look at how many of these presentations we have put on over the last now 13 or 14 months that we've been able to facilitate coming out through a Zoom platform and being able to educate the public in a way that we've never done before. And I'm so proud of that. And then, just lastly, courage to no longer just tune out the noise, but to confront the noise. And it is difficult for us as leaders to be able to do that. We have employees and people that work with us who are scared of things. Oftentimes with fear comes misinformation and reaching out to the wrong sector of our communities. And we just need to have the courage to stand up and say, no, this is what the science says. This is what we're going to follow today. And if things change, we will follow that change as well. And that's hard. And I appreciate that everyone's here willing to do that. And so, again, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We have a couple of questions from our audience, Jim, that I think you and I can tackle to get this off the ground. The first two are, what age ranges does the Delta variant seem to be affecting, and will there be a vaccine that will protect those below the age of 10? So I'll grab that first one. The Delta variant seems to be focused on unvaccinated people. And as we all know, there's a greater number of unvaccinated people in the younger age groups, particularly in those in the 30-40 range group, seems to be the ones ending up in the hospitals and even deaths, unfortunately, attached to that. So I think it's more about being unvaccinated than the age group. And I think our elders, 65 and older, have certainly put a lot of effort into becoming vaccinated and not ending up in the hospital. Jim, if you would tackle about a vaccine for those below age 10, what you see on the horizon?
Sure, I will just dovetail on what you said first, Ed, is that we are seeing now, and it's all anecdotal at this point, but we are seeing younger individuals, including children, who are becoming more severely ill with this particular variant. And so that's a concern. We've talked about that this was a disease of people over the age of 60, and that is no longer the case. And particularly when we start worrying about children, because we often heard, oh, don't worry about kids, they do well with this. Unfortunately, the Delta variant has hit some of them very hard. As far as vaccines for those under the age of 12, because right now Pfizer is approved for 12 and above, we continue to wait patiently for the FDA to review data from both Pfizer and Moderna around pediatric populations with Johnson & Johnson and Novavax right behind that. Of course, the hope had always been that they would get at least one approved for ages younger than 12 prior to the start of the school year at the end of August, beginning of September. It doesn't look likely that's going to happen, but hopefully sometime in the fall we will hear some good news that we'll be able to start vaccinating people who are under the age of 12. So great question.
Yeah, I think we're looking forward to that. So another vaccination question here. How can we try to convince unvaccinated people that the vaccine is safe and the right thing to do? I've had so many conversations with people who have that notion theory that God will save me if I get COVID. It will cause sterility. The government will be able to track me now. These conversations are very frustrating, and I tend to now stop the conversations and move on to something else. So I'll start off by saying, we've actually spent a lot of time over the last 2 months addressing vaccine hesitancy, and we recognize that this is an ongoing challenge for all of us. And I'll speak for Dr. Jarvis and myself. We actually have meetings with people specifically addressing vaccine hesitancy. So what I would say is this particular series, if you all have access to it through the link that you joined us with, if you look at May 6th, the 2 meetings in June, they specifically have experts from immunology, OBGYN that addresses fertility issues. We've really covered a wide range of that. So you have a great resource in tapping into those starting May 6th forward for that detailed information about it. So Jim, I'll give you a chance to elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great, Ed, and I think good advice is to point them towards resources that they both trust and that we trust, that we have trust in as well. For many people, that will be their primary care provider, and so having them reach out to their primary care provider or somebody else who has specific knowledge and interest in public health is often a way to have those discussions. We do know there are some people that no matter what we say about the science, the fear overrides that, and that's going to be the case. And I see a question in there about what risk does unvaccinated people pose to those of us who are vaccinated? And frankly, we are starting to see some breakthrough disease in vaccinated individuals. Thankfully, the majority of them have had mild disease or no symptoms whatsoever. Very few have had any severe disease. And again, almost no deaths in the vaccinated population. So that's good news. The bad news is though that we all are going to come in contact with people who are unvaccinated. Everybody under the age of 12 is unvaccinated. And so we do have that risk of, even if we who are vaccinated only have mild symptoms or no symptoms, we could spread that disease to other vulnerable people. And I think that's where we have to look at vaccination, not only as protection for ourselves, but really as the common good for our communities. This is how we can help those that are immunocompromised and those who cannot be vaccinated.
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that a little bit too. So for those of us who are fully vaccinated, we can still get these various variants and we can spread it. Many times it will be asymptomatic. We don't even know we have it. But we could spread it. The viral load will be less because of our immune systems, but it puts us all at risk. I think the bottom line of this part of the conversation is to manage this worldwide pandemic by definition. Vaccination is our identified solution. So the more people we can get vaccinated around the world, the better off the entire population of our Earth will be. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Let's take a look at work-life integration and balance. Angela, first, help us to understand these concepts and how you manage with your employees.
Yeah, great question. For so many years, I think the working world has thought about and puzzled over how we can have really good work-life balance, which really, when you define balance by that nature of that word, it's about equilibrium, right? So I've got equal work, equal life. How do I equalize those things? And a concept that I've really started to think about and embrace is, instead of that balance idea, but more work-life integration. Meaning, instead of just trying to figure out to balance, how do you literally sort of have a fluid interaction between your work, your life, your home, your family, your friends, so that these things aren't sort of segregated into silos. And many of our panelists have talked about how we've had to pivot so quickly in so many different work environments, where we've really been able to think differently about the nature of work, the location of work, how we accomplish our work. We've got Joe joining us from Presque Isle. If we were doing this in person, that would have been an overnight stay for him, right? Like that, this sort of availability of our tech, and the way we've all been able to sort of rapidly adapt has been fantastic. So I think that focusing on that integration and how do we continue to integrate it, particularly in a state like ours, right? That's very rural. And we've got people from all over, 4 hours north of me here in my home office in Orono, my colleague Joe, all the way down to colleagues in the way southern Maine area.
Great. Well, thanks, Angela. Tony, Michelle, I'm going to focus the next question with you guys. For your employees juggling many factors, including kids and school, what challenges did you observe, and where appropriate, any solutions that evolved from that? We'll start with Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So I think, first of all, we have to be mindful that COVID really affected everyone differently, whether you were married or unmarried. Were you isolating by yourself or with a partner? Was your spouse working? Did you have children, other external family obligations? We all had to be understanding and extra compassionate with everybody on a day-to-day basis. We had to continue to remind all our employees that family and health comes first. At the end of the day, if our employees get sick, then there is no business. We had to recognize that virtually any meeting could be crashed at any point by a family member or pet or the delivery person, bringing groceries or Clorox wipes even. I'd say the best solution for us was constant communication, via email, chat, one-on-one meetings, and probably most importantly for us were our daily stand-ups. And our daily stand-ups, were always in place before COVID, but they were very technical in nature. And I'd say with COVID, this just became a place for all of us to talk about anything and understand sort of everybody's not only professional, but personal impediments that we were facing every day.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I think back over our series here, and Angela, you've talked about communication a host of times. I think Tony's reinforcing that. you know, that, and even that humanity that you introduced earlier in this session, you know, bringing that all together, that sure is a lesson learned. We probably as leaders can't over communicate for the most part, you know, and really putting the effort into making sure that we're engaging people. The fact that we don't hear something doesn't mean it's not happening, you know, and we got to remember that. Great, thanks, Tony. Michelle, your viewpoint on this.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with Tony's comments. I think, you know, communication, and being human. I think we all, you know, in the past, we sometimes forgot that we were human and we had lives outside of work. And so it really helped us to connect with each other in a different way, which I think is, you know, a good thing. I think, you know, challenges, you know, as we've talked about, just creating those boundaries and setting expectations was difficult in the beginning. And I think, you know, we've gotten a lot better at that. And again, back to that human aspect, I think, you know, one of the things that we did at the bank, which was helpful, is that we gave employees time, not just for, you know, medical, if someone had to be called out of work because, you know, of a medical issue, but if they just needed to give their kids a little bit of extra help with their homework, they were allocated some additional time to be able to do that. So I think, you know, we really had to listen to our employees, what was going on in their lives, and put that human lens on running our business to make sure that everyone was being well taken care of.
So I'm going to follow that up, Michelle. You know, thinking about working from home, how easy it is to have the laptop, desktop available indefinitely. You know, as a leader, trying to have that work-life integration and balance for yourself, and then because you have employees across the entire geography of the country, mention that piece of it from their perspective, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think it all, again, you know, really just comes down to knowing what the expectations are and holding yourself accountable and your team accountable to those expectations. So recognizing that if there's something that can be done, you know, at 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, once the kids have gone to bed, you know, if the work can be accomplished within those parameters, that's great. But really, I think it's important to have those parameters in place so there's not confusion, you know, when it comes to why is someone not logged in at the moment, and everybody being in the know, if you will. So not just the leader and their direct report, but really the team and operating in a way where, you know, you're working collaboratively together.
Yeah, you know, the bottom line of it, I think work-life integration is not necessarily natural for everyone. You know, I mean, it's one extreme or the other sometimes that we have to deal with. So thinking through that. So let's bring up a poll on work-life integration from your perspective. Here we go. Vote away, if you will. So the question here is, what's one thing that would increase your work-life integration? Ten-second warning. I'll just make it a little bit longer than 10 seconds by wondering out loud, how many of you are actually measuring those 10 seconds on that warning? Okay, we'll end now. And we see here that hybrid office and remote work option seems to be a real nice approach to increasing work-life integration. That dovetails into flexible scheduling, manager flexibility with the job role, and improved technology as well. So I think the first two, you know, hybrid and flexibility, really makes a big difference. I think many of us on this call have experienced that personally as well. So thanks for that information. Okay, We're going to switch gears a little bit here. So think about that inspirational concept that I shared with all of you at the beginning of this session, returning to new. One of the silver linings of this pandemic is it caused us to look at our businesses, to look for new ways to offer goods and services, to perhaps even reimagine our businesses. Thinking about now and moving into the future, what new ways of meeting your customers' needs did you discover? And what about your employees' needs? So first, customer needs, employees' needs. Michelle, we'll start with you on that.
Okay, sure. I love this question. I think a lot of us really, as we've talked about, we've had to adapt to digital solutions as opposed to in-person solutions. And we had to do that at the bank. We had to look at our processes, and we had to say, if someone needed help with making a deposit, what are some ways that we can really be able to support them so they don't need to come in physically, if they're not comfortable doing so. And in that process, we really uncovered that, there were times when we meet with clients and we would say, for XYZ, thing that you want to do, or just to have a conversation, we want you to come in, we want you to meet in person. And we recognized quickly that that just wasn't, we didn't need to do that. And so we've been able to connect with clients, at their dining room table using calls like this, as we've said. And that's just been, I think, really helpful, meeting people where they're at and their comfort level, when it comes to being out and about. And then, for our employees, really, we took a look at our workforce and we said, what needs to be done in person? Where do we actually need a person in a brick and mortar building? And then what are the other roles within the bank where maybe we don't need to be physically sitting in the office? We came up with a program called Mobile by Design. That's what we call it. And really, we've sort of categorized employees in 4 different spaces. So we have our office-based employees. We have our mobile, which can kind of work anywhere and they sign up for office space. We have home base, like me. I'm 100% working from home. And then, of course, we have assigned folks where they do have a dedicated space and they can work from home from time to time. But really, we had to just kind of look at, what are the responsibilities of the role and set really clear expectations based on those responsibilities as to whether or not a remote working environment was going to make sense.
So it sounded like flexibility was really built into the thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Tony, customers' needs, employees' needs.
Yeah, on the customer front, I mentioned earlier, trade shows are a primary path to market for a company like ours, where you hit the road and you kind of show off your product. Very important for manufacturers who want to be able to have that in-person relationship, as well as get a hands-on experience. As a new company, we didn't have existing sales to leverage, so we had to quickly come up with a plan B to demonstrate the product and its value. And what we found was success with regular technical webinars for those who wanted to engage live with us, ask questions, much like the environment we have right now during this meeting, as well as pre-recorded video clips for those who wanted to kind of engage on their own time. Industry even experimented with virtual trade shows where we had our own booths and people could come and visit, talk to us live. And so that was an experiment as well that we, as an industry, tried out. For our employees, having regular virtual happy hours to catch up and have fun was critical, just to make sure everybody had that sense of team. A few times we even played some mobile party games, stuff on the phone, sent care packages with snacks and beverages, so that we all felt like we were all in the same location, just huddled around our own machine. This allowed all our employees to feel engaged, and it was important. Nobody really wanted to feel like they were all alone and on their own during this time.
So once again, that ties into a lot of direct support, communication, flexibility.
It really does.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Deb, what have you heard and learned in your sphere? So recognizing that you have your immediate customers, you have your immediate employees, but you also represent a lot of other business owners, business leaders, and their customers and employees. So you really kind of can afford us even a broad view of all of this.
I think I will take the view of our members. Certainly, as a
Great.
Chamber of Commerce, our organization, we had to reinvent ourselves and how we support our membership. But it was fascinating and inspiring to see how businesses, many of you here, were forced to adapt and did it. And became very creative. And a lot of smaller business, especially, who business owners are wearing multiple hats. We all know that. And there isn't time to get to everything. And several of them shared with us that they had been meaning to enhance their online e-commerce presence, social media presence. And the pandemic forced them to do that. That was the only way they could do business and the only way they could get products out to customers. So at the end of the day, now, as we're starting to return back to more normal ways of conducting business, they now have that infrastructure in place. So there are a lot of positive things that came out of this. I had an interesting conversation with an employer when we talk about employees. This employer is a very traditional employer, a large employer in our region, and their culture was never about working remotely. Their culture was, you come to the office. It had always been that way, you come to the office. They were forced, as we all were, to go to remote work and recognize that remote work works. And so now they're shifting their culture and their thinking about that being a positive thing. And also employers need to be thinking about the fact that employees, well, many employees will have that expectation that I can work remotely. And if you're not able to offer that option, they're likely to go work for a company that will afford them that option. And to Michelle's point, not every job can happen remotely. So that's another conversation that's complicated and can create some conflict within an organization. How come I can work remotely and Dr. Jarvis can't, or vice versa? So looking at your job descriptions and revisiting those job descriptions with your employees and really thinking about who can work remotely, where can there be a hybrid model, and who really has to be physically present in the office. Those are all of the conversations that are happening right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Jump in and comment on something.
Angela.
Yeah, so Deb, what you just said made me think about one of my favorite phrases, and that is that fair and equal aren't the same, right? So those, and Michelle's a great example because of the way that Bangor Savings has done their multiple tiers of work, fully remote, hybrid, et cetera. Everyone's working. Michelle's not working somehow less because she's 100% remote than her colleague who's 100%. They have different jobs. So it really struck me when you said that, right? There are some jobs that, certainly if I needed a surgery, that can't be done remotely, right? Like I actually need to go see my surgeon.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Ed, if I could just add one thing too, I think
please.
what's interesting is that businesses are no longer just competing for talent locally, right? We're in Portland. We're not just competing against local Portland companies for talent. We're competing against companies across the globe now. If we aren't willing to change and allow employees to work remote and hybrid, other companies will. And we're seeing a lot of people get employed from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And so definitely an important aspect going forward.
But you're playing into what actually seems to be a geographic advantage for Maine. There's certain aspects of recruitment that's easier when people recognize they could do their urban type of job from a semi-rural and rural environment that they prefer, bringing their kids up in. So, Maine has a bit of an advantage there right now, so we could leverage that. I'm going to read a comment that one of our participants has shared with us. Working for the state is a unique experience and the scheduling is very rigid. We've worked remotely all through the pandemic, and now they are having us come into the office part-time. We're trying to get tools and equipment to have dual workspaces. We learned we can do this work from home. Bringing our technology and ergonomic and assistive technology back and forth is proving to be problematic. I am now looking for, other remote jobs and working remotely. And then another participant points out, it forced businesses into the digital world to survive, an ultimate win-win for all. Yeah,
and if I could for just a moment comment on
yeah,
the
please.
win-win for all. I think about it, of course, I work in healthcare, although I'm not clinical myself. If you had asked me several years ago about the idea of telehealth and being able to do virtual visits, I would have thought that was something from Star Trek, perhaps. But it really has become a reality. And it came out of necessity, but we can see so many benefits moving forward, particularly up here in Aroostook County, where we have such terrible winters in terms of weather sometimes and difficult weather, and we have an aging population, and the ability for someone, as Michelle mentioned, to be able to sit at their dining room table and log into an appointment as opposed to having to get out in that cold weather or travel on the icy roads and make it into the hospital setting. It's just huge. So that win-win for all, that things that we developed, particularly for COVID, perhaps, in some ways, now have great and lasting benefits in other ways.
Absolutely. I'll comment on that too. It's kind of interesting. Northern Light Health has been really quite flexible within the confines of, service delivery, et cetera. Like I think we heard earlier, surgery is probably done mostly in ambulatory surgery centers and hospitals. So we're probably not moving into the home environment with that just yet. Having said that, I'll share with you a personal experience. So I'm using a hybrid model where I spend several days a week in the office, as you see in my background right now today, and then some time at home at my home office. And I find myself very productive in the home environment, more so than I would have guessed, say 10 years ago, where it would have been more foreign for me to consider doing that. However, I do find, reading others as well as my own feelings about it, there is really great advantage being in the same office environment as others. The drop-in chats that go on, the problem solving that actually happens during those drop-in chats, you have to put a lot of extra effort to make that happen in the virtual world. And I have. I have had those drop-ins with others, and I do kind of solve some problems in that, 5 minutes, I see you're available, can we chat about this? But it's not the same as being in person. And quite honestly, one of our medical group meetings that was the first ones back in person, there was a lot of hugging and handshaking going on, quite honestly, and it really mattered to a lot of people. So take that into consideration as you're trying to make your decisions there. So I'm going to actually, as we get into our next segment here, I'm going to address another question. Jim, this is in the area of vaccinations again. If someone has had COVID-19 and are unvaccinated, are they safeguarded at all from contracting the Delta variant? And are they protected more or less than vaccinated people? And I'll answer for you. We don't know the complete details of that answer. So having said that, you're set up to share what your understanding is.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there. Some people talk about how quickly these vaccines came to market, and the reason being is we were able to show that their effectiveness because so many people worldwide were infected, and so unfortunately it made the quote experiment go much faster because we could tell that those who got vaccinated weren't getting sick. Thankfully now, at least in the United States, those numbers have tailed off some. So of course, we're seeing this significant increase due to Delta over the last month or so. And so it makes it more difficult for us to determine whether or not you have any protection at all. There's certainly going to be some protection, but that's not the way coronaviruses typically work in the human body. Typically after infection, there's a period of time where we may be protected, but that immunity wanes over time, usually in about the 3-month period, which is why we're telling people who have been sick that they probably should get vaccinated within 90 days so that they continue to have coverage. Though there is a little bit more data coming out that maybe their protection lasts a little bit longer. The wild card again is these variants is, if you were infected with that original type, is it going to protect you against the Delta variant or whatever the next variant that comes along that's worse than that one? And we just don't know. My advice continues to be, even if you have had COVID-19, that vaccination is still important and you should get that. Think about it in flu vaccine. You have influenza. That doesn't mean that you never get the shot again. You have to get it because unfortunately the influenza virus changes over time and you will get infected with a different strain. Similarly will happen with COVID.
So I'll grab onto a piece that you brought up, and I think it addresses somewhat vaccine hesitancy. So the idea that these vaccines, particularly the mRNA from Pfizer and Moderna, came on the market so quickly. I learned something from our guest speaker, our immunologist, Dr. Marnick, back in May, that I thought was very, very useful for me to understand. I'll share that. The mRNA vaccine was built on a platform in response to MERS, M-E-R-S, as well as SARS-CoV-1. So COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2. All three of those are coronaviruses. All of them actually started in China, interestingly. And there was an enormous amount of work developing the mRNA vaccine platform in response to both of those. So going into probably about 15 years ago, all the basic research was done. And then it turned out that SARS-CoV-1 didn't evolve into a pandemic, and therefore the money dried up. So there was no need to actually develop those vaccines any further. So the whole platform was in place, and we were able to build right off of that mRNA platform for SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. So that's part of the answer to, these happen so quickly. Yeah, it happened quickly because they were done 15 years ago, quite honestly. So anyway, that's helpful. All right, we're going to switch gears here. Let's take a look at mobilization of your workforce. Backs against the wall, job to be done. What examples of business processes or decision-making processes that were significantly more efficient in terms of time or materials did you and your team experience? And what lesson learned are you now going to apply to your way of getting things done moving forward? So taking that lesson learned and applying it into your future. So Deb, let's start with you.
18 months ago, we didn't even, a reference to Zoom was a television show I grew up watching in the 70s, right? We will never, as an organization, we've always done in-person events. We do about 50 a year for our members. We're now looking at a hybrid model of events, as I'm sure many of you are. Some things just work better on Zoom or this kind of online platform. We find that even our board meetings, we have greater engagement from participants on this platform. So we're revisiting everything that we offer our membership, especially around events, and looking at a hybrid model. Some things bringing back the in-person experience, because there's so much you gain from that in-person experience that you just can't gain this way, to Ed's point earlier. But there are things you gain from this experience where people can join us from anywhere. We can record it and share it anywhere that you can't gain from an in-person experience. So we're looking at our entire, how we best serve our customers, our region, our membership. One of the, something that you brought up, I just wanted to bring up, and it's related to this question about changing business processes going forward. But I think we also tend to underestimate customers' ability to adapt. And to the point Joe made about telehealth and telemedicine, I just find it interesting how we as human beings are able to adapt to change. And I think as businesses, we need to be mindful of that and not overthink change. Customers will adapt. If you're offering them a good product, a good service, they will adapt to that change. I found that very fascinating.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. I just did a time check, and unfortunately, we don't have 2 hours. So I'm going to have to shift gears a little bit here. Just a quick touch on remote work. And Joe, I'll tap into you for a 1-minute response, if you will. Based on your experience with employees working remotely, what are some of the key takeaways you picked up from an HR perspective?
Yeah, what I've found is that it's really about the rhythm someone has in their life, right? Sometimes it works really, really well for people, and sometimes it does not work well at all. You talked about the personal engagement in a meeting and be able to shake hands or give a hug. and the connectedness you get from being in person. So for some people, it's extremely important to be together and in person, and that's what they would prefer. But there are other people who really enjoy the ability to work remotely and to have that flexibility and the rhythms in their life, their children, their pets, their families, whatever it may be. That flexibility is a benefit for them. So it's not a cookie cutter solution. It's very much about individuals and how we meet the needs of the individual while also meeting the needs of the organization.
Great, thanks, Joe. So I'm going to go to wrap it up here. I'll ask each of our panelists to weigh in, about 30 seconds, if you will. Thinking about running a business going forward and the rich experience you've all gained over the last 16 months, what one thing will you be doing differently or where you are thinking differently thanks to the experience you have gained? Michelle, can you grab that?
Sure, thanks, Ed. I think that to all of the comments that have made so far, just really being able to be flexible and agile and continue to look at our processes, because let's be honest, the state that we're in today could change, tomorrow. Anything can change on a dime. We've learned that. And so we just really have to, again, communicate with our teammates, communicate with our clients, and be creative. I guess that would be my one thing to continue to do going forward.
Isn't it fantastic to hear someone in the banking industry actually say, being creative is the answer? That's awesome. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, and I'd say that hybrid mode and sort of flexibility around scheduling, I consider a benefit of our company going forward. Everybody's work-life balance is different. And though we do need to overlap with each other's time, from time to time, it doesn't have to happen all the time between 8 and 5.
Yeah.
So allowing every employee to be able to kind of come in the office when they want to work on their or remotely work on their own is now their decision. I'd say one important piece, though, is that for those of us who are centered around a table in a physical location and having colleagues that are remote, we're all going to prefer to actually still log into the meeting so that everybody can feel the same level of engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so being cognizant of that part.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that creativity is central to the core of the work you do.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Angela, could you weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned right at the beginning, just this idea of humanity, right? So my hope is that moving forward, we continue to remember that at the end of the day, we're all people, regardless of the type of work we're doing, and then just to continue to sort of bring that level of humanity, flexibility, adaptability, resilience into our workforce.
Thanks so much. Deb, if you would weigh in.
I certainly ditto and echo everything that's been said. And I personally think that coming out of this, and hopefully that's where we are, has been more challenging than when we went into it. And we were all in crisis mode and mode because there will continue to be changes and continue to be uncertainty. And one lesson I've learned is that as individuals, we handle change and stress different. So for some employees, they just roll with it. They actually thrive on change and uncertainty and what's next and creativity. And others struggle with it. They like things being a certain way, and they like to know what to expect each and every day. So as a leader, being sensitive and aware of that, and because we're not done. Certainly not done.
This is not over yet. You're right. Joe, if you'd weigh in on 30 seconds.
Yeah, for me, it's about the challenge of, excuse me, how to keep employees engaged. It's not as simple as perhaps once was. And I don't know if it was ever simple to keep employees engaged. There are always challenges with that, but the fact that we're in such different settings now and so far spread out, you have to work that much harder to make sure people stay connected and integrated. And so it's something new to think about and a new way to look at a very important part of the work life.
Great, thanks, Joe. Jim, I'm going to steal your 30 seconds. Okay. We've included some tools for you at the end of this presentation. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. I hope this hour, hang on a second, it just stole away my talking points. I hope this hour has been a help to support you, your employees, and our communities to safely manage your business. Just a reminder, we will be emailing you a survey right after our conference. Please be sure to give us your feedback so we can continue to provide relevant information. And on there is an opportunity to comment what topics you'd like to talk about. Part of the takeaway today will be further information about COVID-19 and vaccination hesitancy. I think we learned that's still pretty high on your mind. Our next session will be on August 5th. Our theme for this session will be back to school. What will this year look like? The specific topics, and Ben, if you could put up those specific topics for August 5th on the slide deck. The specific topics are listed on that slide. As you can see, the session will include considerable forward thinking to support your planning process. So I hope you will join us for that. We will send you the link for this session. We encourage you to share the invitation with your friends, colleagues, and others who might benefit from this information. By working together to promote good health, we will be promoting good business. Thank you and have a good afternoon.